This is MG's latest fully electric vehicle. It's called the MGS6 EV, and it actually follows on from the S5 EV, which I previously reviewed on the channel and was actually left pretty impressed across the board. As you might expect, the S6 EV is its largest sibling. Now, at the time of filming and in the UK, it's available in 3 different configurations. You have got the SE long range, the Trophy long range, and then the Trophy dual motor. Prices range from roughly £38,000 and go up to £44,000 without adding any additional options. Now, in this review, which we covered in such a format, we'll see if it's actually worth its price tag, how it compares to its sibling and also rivals, and of course, if it's actually worth it. So let's kick things off and talk about its electric range. And here you've got a 77 kilowatt hour nickel cobalt manganese battery pack. And this is across the entire trim range and no matter which powertrain you go for, at least at the time of filming and in the UK. Here you've got a WLTP mixed driving cycle claim of 329 miles for the single motor, and the dual motor, due to the additional weight and extra power, drops down to roughly 301 miles. Now, it's worth pointing out that no matter which trim level you go for, and as far as I'm aware, a heat pump does not come included in the MG6 EV, which is actually quite disheartening. The same could be said about some of the other MG vehicles on fleet. And this effectively means that when it comes to heating up the cabin on those colder climate days, it just becomes less efficient. Now, for my own mixed driving tests, which were done on the motorway, on city roads, and also on those country roads, I netted 265 to 285, which is actually pretty impressive and is somewhat in line with what I would have expected, considering when I reviewed the MGS5 EV, it netted roughly 245 to 265 miles. As you'll be able to see from the mileage leaderboard, it does actually stand pretty tall in comparison to some of its key competitors. And given the overall price point that MG is coming in at with the S6 EV, it's actually pretty impressive. Now, another thing which I do like is the fact that the manufacturer has thought about the different modes of regenerative braking. And here I have assigned the custom button, which is a star icon on my steering wheel, to adjust just that. Right now I'm on the level 1 mode and just going at roughly 60 miles an hour. If I were to lift off, the vehicle will feel like it's coasting, although there is a slight degree of regenerative braking. If I want a harsher mode, I can go, for example, on the medium or the strong mode, which would go up to level 3. And yet again, if I speed up to 60 miles an hour and then lift off, the vehicle does feel like it's decelerating a lot more harshly. That's actually quite useful, for example, if you're in and around town and you just don't want to be using the physical brake pedal all that much. Now, there is also a 1-pedal drive mode. However, the only way to access that, specifically when you're on the move, is to faff around with the infotainment system. You'll have to press the little icon, which is a car icon, then go into driving control, then go on to 1-pedal drive. And right now, I am on 1-pedal drive, and therefore it does mean that if I were to lift off the accelerator pedal at roughly 60 miles an hour, the vehicle will decelerate even more harshly, and also come to a complete standstill, which I'm not going to quite demonstrate right now because I'm on the motorway. Now, while it is appreciated that you've got that 1-pedal drive mode, it would have been great if the manufacturer had incorporated that as part of the custom button, because right now if I do want to go out of the 1-pedal drive mode, and let's say I've gone on my navigation, it gives me a pop-up notification saying you can't do it because you're on 1-pedal drive mode. So therefore I have to go back into the infotainment system, go back on that option, disable 1-pedal drive mode, and now I've got those regen braking options, which also give me the adaptive mode as well. Effectively, what I'm trying to say over here is that I do appreciate the customization, although it would have been better in terms of practicality if the manufacturer had really thought it through, specifically when it comes to 1-pedal drive. Aside from recouping energy while on the move, you can also plug it in. And via CCS port, it'll take up to 144 kilowatts of input, allowing you to go from 10 to 80% in 38 minutes. Via 50 kilowatt charger, this will take roughly 1 hour and 10 minutes. There is also a 7 kilowatt onboard charger, which is slightly disheartening for those people that would have had access to 3-phase power supply, for example, 11 or 22 kilowatt chargers. Nonetheless, via its Type 2 port, you can go from 10 to 100% in 12 hours, and via 3-pin input, it will take you 37 hours. It's nice to see that the vehicle does come fitted as standard with vehicle-to-load charging, allowing you to effectively discharge the battery pack, and that can be handy, for example, for powering a household appliance, for example, a coffee machine or an airbed when you go camping. Moving on, we get on to driving comfort. And in terms of its suspension configuration, you've got a MacPherson strut setup at the front and a multi-link configuration at the rear. The combination does yield for a pretty good experience, be it in terms of when you're going on the motorway, and therefore it does soak up quite a lot of those anomalies, and equally if you're just going to be pottering around town, it does well in terms of taking away that shock when it comes to going over a pothole or, for example, speed bump. Make no mistake, it's not exactly as well adapted in comparison to more advanced suspension systems out there on the market, and therefore won't compete with adaptive air suspension configurations, but in the grander scheme of things, I've got no real complaints. I think most consumers will be pleasantly surprised and pretty comfortable when it comes to driving the S6 EV. Now, in terms of the overall cabin noise, it's decent. Here right now I'm on the motorway and there's minimal amount of road noise, be it in terms of the tyres or indeed in terms of wind that's deflecting off the A-pillars. And therefore it just means that the vehicle does feel a little bit more serene and therefore does complement it in terms of its overall interior design, which I'll be touching upon further down. Now, in terms of the overall driving dynamics, well, it's no surprise to learn over here that it doesn't quite compete with more sportier SUVs out there, because it does suffer from quite a bit of body lean and you don't exactly have that one-to-one connection with the front axle, even in terms of its sport mode preset. With that said, I do think a lot of people will be pretty happy when it comes to driving it, because you've got a rear-wheel drive or an all-wheel drive configuration, and therefore in comparison to some of its alternatives which operate on a front-wheel drive configuration, well, this just feels a little bit more fun to drive. So moving on, we get onto performance, and here the rear-wheel drive vehicle has got 180 kilowatts of power, or 241 horsepower, and 350 newton-meters of torque. It's claimed to go from 0 to 62 miles an hour in 7.3 seconds, and this was the vehicle that was on review. There is also the all-wheel drive vehicle, which has got a whopping 266 kilowatts of power, or 357 horsepower, and 540 newton-meters of torque, claimed to go from 0 to 62 miles an hour in 5.1 seconds. Now, using RaceLogic's Performance Box Touch and of course testing the former, I had it clocked in from 0 to 20 miles an hour in 2.01 seconds, 0 to 30 miles an hour in 3.02 seconds, 0 to 60 miles an hour in 6.74 seconds, so yes, faster than the manufacturer's claim, and 50 to 70 miles an hour in just 3.49 seconds. It's also got a peak acceleration of 0.47 G. In terms of its top speed, it's electronically limited to 124 miles an hour. And therefore should suffice for the vast majority of consumers. So indeed over here the vehicle does actually feel pretty fast to drive, even if you're going for the rear-wheel drive vehicle. And if you have got that extra money to spend and you just want that extra bit of performance, then that all-wheel drive vehicle will send your head flying back to the headrest. So next up we get onto its interior design, and here I really do love what the manufacturers achieved within the S6 EV. It's far more elevated in comparison to its slightly cheaper sibling, the S5 EV, and in comparison to the vast majority of alternatives out there, well, I do really love its look. Here you have got a black fabric design in the SE, and then this moves over to a grey leather style with suede style seats and a carbon effect in the trophy trim. You've also got the optional and pictured beige seats with a natural effect instead. Indeed, everywhere you look and feel, it really does ooze class, and it goes far beyond its price suggests. Furthermore, it's also pretty practical. You've got physical buttons which are found on the steering wheel. You also have traditional stalks and a flurry of physical controls that are found towards the dashboard. For example, your climate controls and also your media settings, and therefore makes it just a little bit more practical to use on the move. Furthermore, you've got two customizable star icon buttons which are found on the steering wheel. As I did touch upon before, I assigned one of them for regenerative braking and the other one I actually set to my drive mode. In terms of the use of technology, you have got a 12.8-inch display that's planted at the center of the dashboard. It's relatively intuitively laid out, however I do find it a little bit laggy in here when it comes to going between different menus, or even when you just go and power up the vehicle for the very first time, it does take a little while to initiate. Especially over here if you're flicking between apps, well, it just feels pretty slow, especially if you do compare it with some of its key competitors. Nonetheless, you do have wireless and wired Android Auto and Apple CarPlay support, and therefore it does almost make you forget about the infotainment system altogether, especially if you're going to be using these third-party mobile operating systems. It's also worth mentioning that in the trophy trim, you've also got certain extra services such as YouTube and Spotify, which do become included, although there is no option to add this in within the SE trim. Now you have also got a fully digitalized 10.25-inch instrument cluster, which is actually pretty customizable and therefore gives you the right sort of information that you require, such as your traversing speed or the safety systems that are in operation. Now, as an extension of this, you have got a projected head-up display, which is actually present in the top spec trophy trim, and the very first time I've actually come across it in an MG vehicle. So yes, indeed, it's actually pretty nice because it bolsters the overall safety credentials while you're on the move by keeping all the right information that you require straight in front of you. Although it's worth mentioning over here that turn-based navigation data will be fed through from the built-in sat-nav, but not via third-party mobile operating systems such as Android Auto or Apple CarPlay. Now elsewhere, I would like to have a quick word about its audio system. And here in the SE trim, you have got 8 speakers. However, in the trophy model, which is on review, you have got 11 audio drivers instead. To be more specific, you have got 4 speakers, which are found within each of the 4 doors, speakers that are found within the extremities of the dashboard, and one that's concealed at the middle. The SE model does away with the center audio driver and also the tweeters that are found at the back. Now what I'll say is, be it if you go for the SE or the trophy model, it does actually give you a little bit of a lackluster audio reproduction. It doesn't do well across the sound frequency range. And indeed over here, in comparison to some of its key competitors, it's a bit of a shortfall. Not only you haven't got forward sounding mid-range, you also have a little bit of a lackluster soundstage, and you do not have a subwoofer, which would have bolstered the overall low-end prowess. Effectively, what I'm trying to say over here is the audiophiles will be left a little bit disappointed with the S6 EV, and therefore you might want to look into aftermarket solutions or indeed another vehicle altogether. Moving on, we get onto storage, and here you've got the glove box, which has actually been optimized for right-hand drive vehicles. Then towards the center console, you've got an angled 50-watt wireless charger with a cooling bay as well, and therefore means that if you've got an appropriate smartphone, it will rapidly recharge wirelessly. Further down, you've got 2 cup holders, and then you've got a humongous compartment that's found within the center armrest. Furthermore, you've got a very large open area that's found underneath the center armrest, and here you also find 2 USB Type-C ports and a 12-volt socket, which can be handy, for example, for plugging a dash cam or, of course, connecting up to the infotainment system. You'll also find a further 2 USB Type-C ports at the rear of the cabin. As for the door bins, the front 2 are very large and will easily accommodate a 500ml bottle alongside some small to medium sized valuables, while the rear 2 are unsurprisingly a little bit more limited, but still very capable. You've also got a pull down armrest compartment which reveals 2 cup holders. Of course, when it comes to storage, we have to talk about its boot capacity. And here you've got a whopping 674 litres to play around with, or 1,910 litres if you drop down the seats. Indeed, it is humongous, and very much in line with some larger SUVs out there on the market. You'll easily fit your weekly shops and larger luggage. Furthermore, it's very practical. You have got a hatchback design, and you've also got a smart tailgate function in the trophy trims. There are 60-40 rear split folding seats and also a near flat loading bay. I say near because there's a small little lip and a little angled area which sits between the rear portion of the seats and also the boot floor. There's also a small little underfloor compartment which will suffice for taking your tyre repair kit among a few other things. If, however, you want to take your charging cables, then you might want to pop them at the front of the vehicle, because here in the rear-wheel drive vehicles, you've got 124 litres of capacity, and this actually drops down to 102 litres in the all-wheel drive models. Still plentiful to say the least, and you can even fit a smaller sized luggage. Frankly, when it comes to the amount of space that you have got, it's actually really impressive. Furthermore, you've got 75 kilograms of roof load capabilities, and in terms of brake trailers, it sits at 750 kilograms, while for unbrake trailers, it goes up to 1,500 kilograms. So yes, in terms of towing, it's also still pretty capable. So while its storage capabilities are very impressive, it really actually stands out when it comes to your overall seating comfort and also capacity. First off, you have got a heated steering wheel as standard, and the same could be said for the front 2 seats. If, however, you want a ventilation function for the front 2 seats and rear outer heated seats, you'll have to go for the trophy models. In terms of the overall controls that you've got, it sits at 6-way manual controls for the driver and 4-way controls for the passenger, at least in the SE model. This then moves over to 6-way electronic controls with a 4-way lumbar support and a memory function in the trophy spec, at least for the driver, and also 4-way electronic controls for the passenger. There is also a panoramic roof in the top spec model. In terms of the seats themselves, they're very accommodating and soft. And in terms of headroom and legroom, this is where it really kind of stands out, because at the back, you can pretty much stand up. Yes, indeed, it's absolutely humongous. As someone who's just under 6 foot, I had absolutely no problem whatsoever. You could fit 3 full-size adults over here or multiple car seats. Indeed, it's really impressive as to what MG has been able to achieve within the S6 EV. And in comparison to its smaller sibling, the S5 EV, I do think this will very much be suitable for larger size families. Another thing which I really do rate is its overall exterior design. You've got a pretty sleek profile towards the front, and this is namely just due to the pretty slender headlights, which also wrap around towards the side of the vehicle. You've also got a pretty accentuated look, which gives it that sort of sporty flair. There is also an active grille design that can be found towards the lower portion of the bumper, and this effectively lets air in or out depending on your situation. Towards the side, you've also got a pretty nice silhouette, and this is also aided by the fact that you have got 19 to 20 inch alloys, depending on the trim level chosen. Towards the rear, you have also got a very modern flair to it, and it's somewhat reminiscent to an Audi vehicle, which is not necessarily a bad thing. This is just due to how the tail lights stretch around the vehicle and have also got that kind of light bar feel to it. As for the diffuser per se, it also gives it that sort of sporty profile, which is aided by the fact that you've also got an integrated spoiler. Frankly, when it comes to its exterior design, I've got no complaints, but I'd be curious to hear your thoughts down in the comment section below. As for your colour options, it comes as standard in Arctic White. If, however, you want a blue, black, grey or silver finish, it'll cost you an additional £545. Or if you want the pictured red or the exclusive gold colour, which is available in the S6 EV, you'll have to splash out an additional £695, which I do actually think is very reasonable. Now, yet another nod towards what MG has been able to achieve within the S6 EV is in terms of the overall safety credentials. It was recently tested by Euro NCAP and awarded a full 5 out of 5 stars, scoring 92% in adult occupancy, 85% in child occupancy, and 78% in its safety assist scores. Here you've also got a plethora of driver assistance systems that come featured as standard across the entire trim range. Adaptive cruise control with intelligent cruise assist, which does work a decent job, although it does sometimes feel a little bit jerky on the motorway. You then also have active emergency braking, lane keep assist with lane departure warning and emergency lane keeping, lane change assist, traffic jam assist, intelligent speed limit assist with traffic sign recognition, driver monitoring system, forward and rear collision warning, blind spot detection, active rear cross traffic alert, and door opening warning. Yes, indeed, it's good to see that all of these come fitted as standard. Now, it's great to see that the manufacturer has included a whole bunch of driver assistance systems and therefore should keep you safer on the road. However, it's worth highlighting that they will become re-enabled every single time you power on the vehicle, no matter your last used setting. And this is due to some nonsensical regulatory requirements, for example, from the likes of Euro NCAP. Now, thankfully, the manufacturers actually thought it through, because through a menu that can be found on the infotainment system, you can access the MG Pilot Custom function. By long pressing it, it will remember your settings that you have actually used. And therefore, when it comes to stepping out the vehicle and then powering it on again, if you step inside and all those systems have become re-enabled, you can simply tap it once and then confirm, and it will disable all those systems that you didn't want. A really handy inclusion and something that I wish more manufacturers would do, because it kind of drives me up the wall as someone who lives near country roads. And indeed over here, some of the systems will become a little more counterintuitive and in some degree even less safe. For example, the traffic sign recognition system, which will incorrectly bing and bong at you because it's picked up the wrong road sign. Or for example, the lane departure warning, which will sometimes veer you towards a car rather than away of it because it hasn't quite detected the lines. And this is very much present on all vehicles that I've reviewed to date. And therefore, it's good to see that MG has actually thought it through to think of its customers first. Now, in terms of parking it, it's also very easy to maneuver. It's got a turning circle of 11.1 to 12.4 meters, depending on the chosen trim level and powertrain. You've also got rear sensors and a high-resolution reversing camera in the SE model. If you want front sensors and 360-degree cameras, you'll have to go for the Trophy model. As for visibility at the front, it's a non-issue, and the same could be said towards the side and at the rear, where you've also got a wiper, which can be handy on those muddier terrain. So with all that in mind, it brings us on to a verdict of the MGS6 EV. and it's not quite perfect across the board. See here, it would have been great if the manufacturer had included a heat pump, be it as standard or at the very least as an optional extra, as it would have aided the overall efficiency on those colder climate days. Nonetheless, you're still getting a pretty good electric range, and therefore it should suffice for the vast majority of consumers. In terms of the use of technology, it's great to see that there is a head-up display finally on an MG vehicle. However, the infotainment system does feel pretty sluggish, namely if you do compare and contrast it with some of its key competitors. A complaint I've had with some of the other MG vehicles, and at this sort of price point, it's a little less inexcusable. In terms of the other aspects of this vehicle, well, it does actually do pretty well. It's pretty comfortable to drive. It's very stylish in terms of its exterior and interior design. You've got plenty of features that come included as standard, which is certainly appreciated, be it in terms of driver assistance systems or in terms of overall comfort, for example, heated seats. And you've also got an absolutely staggering amount of room when it comes to rear occupancy space and also its boot capacity. Combining that with a pretty competitive price, well, it makes the MGS6 EV a no-brainer if you're looking for a larger sized SUV and you want an alternative from its sibling, the S5 EV, or of course some other alternatives out there on the market. And as such, it gets our Best Buy award. Now I'd be curious to know what you make of it down in the comment section below, and if you'd pick it over some of its competitors. If you've enjoyed this detailed independent review, definitely do consider dropping a like, subscribing and hitting that bell notification, all of which would be greatly appreciated. As such, I've been Chris from TotallyEV, and I hope you see you next one. Take care of yourselves, and goodbye.